have an exciting presentation today brought to you by Steve Trover. There you go.
There you go.
I could say a lot more, but I'm going to leave it at that.
All right.
All right. No, this is my mic.
No, this is your mic.
This is for questions. So as we have questions, it is being recorded, so we want to make sure that everybody speaks into a mic. And with that, Steve, we'll let you get going.
Okay, thank you. All right, so I talked to Amy a while back, and I love this conference. I think it's awesome, and I've been in the vacation rental industry for about 25 years, and love data, love revenue management. Wasn't able to do a lot of it back when I was as a PM, just simply because we didn't have all the cool tools that we all have today. But it's awesome to see. And what I talked to Amy about is I said, we have all this data that we look at to optimize our vacation rental company as it pertains to rentals and inventory and all that. And that's awesome. But there's also another part of our industry, and that's the people side, right? And so this entire industry is made up of great people that do great things. Without the people side, there would be no revenue management. So I talked her into letting me do this session, and I hope you find some value out of it. The title is Driving Results with People Data, and we're going to talk about what people data is in a second. But if you think about the single largest, and by the way, the wrinkle is not my laptop, there's a screen. So, my OCD is kicking in big time. So the single largest P&L expense, if you look at any P&L of any VRM, and I've looked at a lot of them, is not your marketing budget, it's people, right? So it's your payroll. And so when we look at that cost structure and we think of that in the context of the marketing budget, we think if we're optimizing and we're doing all these things and we've got all this data that we look at and software to optimize our rentals, we probably ought to optimize the people side as well. And we all try to do that in different ways. And we're going to talk about how we do that in my company. So like I said, I was a VRM for about 20 years. 5 years ago, I started a consulting company called Levere. Almost immediately started getting asked to do recruiting. And I'm not a recruiter. In fact, I don't even like recruiters, even though I have a recruiting company. And when we would use them in the past, I didn't like them because they charged a lot of money for something I thought I could do myself. So that said, we started doing some recruiting, and people would ask us to hire a GM, that type of thing. Well, the first thing I said to them, I said, if you're going to have us recruit, we're going to look at people data, and we're going to talk about what that is. People data is a lot of different things, and everybody in the room that does any hiring whatsoever looks at people data. And you look at things like their resume, of course, that's kind of one of the first things you look at. References, do a reference check, there's data that comes out of that. There's a lot of data on a resume, by the way, that you can extract if you look at it right. You get a lot of data points in an interview, especially if you do a structured interview, which we definitely recommend. Structured interviews are essentially when you do an interview, you make sure that you ask each applicant for a role the same questions, and then you rate them on each one of those questions. That way you get a real objective view of that individual. So that's a good way to extract data through an interview process. The application itself, the traditional normal application has some data points for sure. If you structure an application properly, you can actually extract more data points than you normally would. And get some really key elements to identify, great people in that. Their social media footprint. How many of you, when you get an application from somebody, go look up on Facebook, LinkedIn, whatever? Of course you do, right? And sometimes you never actually talk to that person because of what you find. So a lot of data points on there. Social media footprint, especially at LinkedIn. LinkedIn is a really great tool. It's funny how many times we'll look at somebody's resume, an application, and it doesn't mirror their LinkedIn profile, and you find some things on there that are different, and you're asking why. And so again, data points. And then a background check, kind of as one of the final steps that we do is data. So these are kind of the traditional things that you would look at. Pretty much everybody goes through this process in the hiring process, pulling together data. But if you think about that really is this first component, and that's the resume, their interview, that's their knowledge, skills, and experience. We call it the briefcase, right? It's everything that they bring with them. It's not who they are, it's what they've learned. It's kind of how they've started to form as an individual, as a potential team member on your team. but it does change over time. We all, our resume gets longer and we get more knowledge and skills over time. It's a very important data point, but what I will tell you is most studies show that it's actually not a real strong predictor of success in the job. So, we get asked all the time for people to have vacation rental experience, and I'm not saying that that is not good. One of the best things is that you get somebody that gets up to speed pretty quickly, but it's not necessarily a strong predictor of success. There's people in the room that are in their very first vacation rental job that are really good at it, right? You probably wouldn't be here if you weren't. And so experience is an important data point, but again, not the strongest predictor. Behavioral and cognitive actually are the strongest predictors when they study it and they look at it. In fact, those two combined, the cognitive and behavioral assessments that we do, will really give you great data in order to understand what makes someone tick and how they think. And that's going to be a much better predictor. And guess what? The whole person shows up, not just their briefcase, not just their resume, their experience. And so it's really important that we understand that before we put them in that seat. There's different ways to do it. You can wait until you find out, and that's what a lot of people do. They hire somebody and they say, well, that didn't work out. Well, how much does it cost when it doesn't work out? It's one of the most expensive things in business is to hire somebody, train them, 3 months later they quit, or you fire them, one or the other. And so that's what we try to avoid when looking at people data. So one of the first things that we look at is their cognitive ability. How many of you have hired somebody and 3 months after they're hired, they still haven't learned how to use the PMS platform or some other technology, right? Happens all the time. And so you could say, well, are they lazy? Are they stupid? They may not be stupid. They may, in fact, IQ, there's a correlation to IQ with cognitive, but cognitive really tells us how fast they can learn new things. And some people learn fast and some people don't. And we want a job for everybody, but sometimes the job's not for that person. And so when we test for cognitive, we're really trying to understand the job requirements, how much technology they might have to learn. If there's somebody that's not from the industry and they have to pick up the whole concept of vacation rentals, we want a reasonable amount of cognitive ability to be able to do that. And so we set a cognitive score based on that. And depending on what role it is, it may be right at the midpoint, which is the average of all people. The higher it goes, it's a higher percentile. So very rarely in the vacation rental industry do we want somebody even that's at the 450, that's like, rocket scientist level, but we definitely want somebody that's got a reasonable amount of cognitive abilities for that particular role. The test that we use, and by the way, there's a lot of different tests. We're going to talk about all the different ways you can look at that. The test we use is 12 minutes in length. It's 50 questions long. It's a speed test. It's a tough test. If you guys ever want some torture, ask me. I'll send it to you. You can try it. It's not fun. It is a very, very good way to predict whether they're able to understand complex ideas. So why do people behave the way they do? So people have drives. That's your personality traits. Those drives create needs. And those, the response to those needs are their behaviors. So that your personality is made up of drives and needs. If you only see this, and those are the behaviors you see when you hire somebody and you bring them on the team, it's not enough, right? You're guessing at those components. And so what we recommend that you do is you measure this in advance, what their behavioral drives are, so that you can predict what their needs are. And we're going to talk about why that's important a little bit later, and the response to those needs that are their behaviors. How many have hired somebody? I know I have hired many people like this, thought they were going to work out because the interview was phenomenal. 3 months later, you're like, this is just not going to work. Does that happen from time to time? Okay. And a lot of times it's not because that was a bad person. They may have had a really good resume. They have good background and experiences. It's just they're not designed for that particular role. There's a role for pretty much everybody on the planet, but we end up hiring somebody and we put them in maintenance or reservations or over revenue management, right? And they don't have the right behavioral drives to be successful in that particular role. So the key is understanding not just what their drives are, but what the right drives and behaviors that you're looking for a particular role so that you can target those types of behaviors in an individual. So the behavioral assessment can be used, and the primary thing we use it for in our hiring platform is obviously candidate fit. So we're working with the clients to make sure that we set the job target appropriately so that we're bringing in people that have the right behavioral drives and are a good fit for the role. The next thing that you can do is career path, and then also helping people work together. Because if they understand each other, they can treat each other differently, and you'll have a much more effective team when they do that. So relationships, we're going to talk about that as well. So like I said, there's a million different, I shouldn't say a million, there's actually 800 plus assessments, everything from, strong, DISC. DISC is phenomenal, by the way. Sue Jones, who introduced me, she's DISC certified. DISC is a really great assessment tool. The one I use is called Predictive Index, but there's a lot of good ones out there. There's also Facebook ones, right? So you gotta be careful, right? Like, which princess are you? And so you gotta be careful what you use. Not all the 800 are good. You really want one that's actually valid for pre-hire selection in hiring. You gotta make sure that it's something that has actually been proven to be valid for that particular type of scenario, or you get trouble. DISC is an example where it's really good once somebody's on a team. It actually takes too long to administer to give it to applicants at the top of funnel. The reason why I use the one I use, when you look at them, I would use one that doesn't take very long to take, because applicants aren't going to fill out something that takes a long time. Ours takes 5 minutes. Everybody does it. Most people, when you take it, you think, how did that get anything? It's amazingly accurate. Spooky, scary accurate the way that it works. So, but brevity is important when doing behavioral assessments. So what makes a good psychometric validity? I mean, if it's not valid, if it's the princess thing for Facebook, or one of those that's actually not been shown to be valid scientifically, don't use it. So make sure that you have something that is exceptionally valid. The one we use, I said Predictive Index. There's been more than 500 scientific validity studies done on it. It's been used for over 60 years. There's 8,000 companies using it in 172 countries, and over 30 million assessments have been given. And so the algorithm actually gets better and more accurate the more assessments that are given over time. So it's a very, very accurate instrument, and it's scientifically valid. It's been proven in all those studies. So, and I'm not up here selling. Just find one like that if you don't use that one. So, I'm going to talk about the traits that in most of them measure. So, in this case, the first trait of the 4 behavioral drives that it measures is the A trait. The A trait is whether somebody is more independent and assertive or more collaborative in nature. So independent and assertive people, collaborative people like the best ideas. So they like to work with a team to come up with the best idea. High A's like their ideas best. So how many of you know a high A? So the person next to you. Yeah. And high A is a lot of times you find leadership roles, you're going to be looking for a high A. Not always, because low A's can lead too. It just depends on the role. So we shape the particular target based on the. We shape the target that we're looking for based on each one of these drives. So if you think about a role that you have, who has a role that they have open right now? What is it?
Revenue manager.
What is it?
Revenue manager.
Revenue manager. Okay, and do you think that that would be a high A role where they like their idea best, or a low A role, best idea?
High A.
High A, you want somebody that's assertive, self-confident, and that type of thing, because they got to be decisive. Is that what you're thinking? Okay, so we're going to set your target for the revenue manager right now. So the next trait that we look at is the B trait. Think introvert versus extrovert. A B on the right side, you can call that a high B. On the low side, on the left side would be a low B. It's not good or bad, it's just different. High A is social and outgoing. They like to talk through things to think, or think, they think through things by talking in groups and that type of thing. A low B is head down, very, focused on their work, likes to think through things. So with revenue manager, what do you think?
More on the low side.
On the low side, so head down, more of a analytical thinker. So this is the analytics trait, by the way. Low Bs are more analytical, high Bs not so much, so that's probably a good, would you guys agree with that? That sounds about right. So think it through, talk it through. The C trait, let's go fast. Now, I'm going to describe this one since we're doing a revenue management. Let's be methodical. So the low C likes a lot of variation in their workday. They're not very good at repetitive tasks. The high C, super methodical, can do things over and over again, much more patient. Low Cs are impatient, fast-paced, variation. High C, methodical, likes repetitive tasks. What do we want?
Definitely
High C. So, okay, so we've got a high A, low B, high C. All right. D trait, last trait is the D trait. If you're on the high side of D or the right side, you'd be more precise and detail oriented, and you would follow the rules. Highest Ds, if somebody's way high on the D trait, they stop at the stop sign, they roll back before they go forward. Low Ds don't even know there's a stop sign. I'm the lowest D, so. And so what do we want in the revenue manager? High D, right? We want precision, detail oriented. They can't screw up, right? You know what the best thing about a high D is? If they do screw up, you don't even have to tell them about it. They already know and they'll never do it again. Low Ds, we don't even know we screwed up. So yeah, definitely. So in that case, we wanted a high A, low B, high C, high D profile. And we would set the target that way and filter, and every applicant would take this survey and it would tell us how close of a match they are to that. Now think about this for a second. Are you actively hiring them right now? Are you behavioral profiling? No. Okay, so I'm sorry I'm picking on you. I apologize. I'll buy you a drink later. But you know, if you think about that, you're kind of flying blind as it pertains to these things. And just in your defense, I did that for years, right? And I kept beating my head against the wall going, why can't Mike just figure this out? Well, Mike was not designed for that particular role. And so when we're setting a job target, it's very important to get what I just described right. A lot of times we'll set one and our client will go, but I really like this person. I just interviewed them, they're great. And they're a lowest D as a revenue manager. And I'm like, okay, but you know, the rates are going to be all screwed up. I just hire and go right ahead. I bet I can predict what's going to happen, right? So it's really important to set that job target right when we do that. So let's be flexible, not something you want in your revenue manager. Now, in your business development person, absolutely, all day. You know, you need to be flexible to get the sales sometimes. Let's do it. So this is an example of a job target. We call this a job filter, actually. And so as you can see, we put the filter for the A trait on the low side for this particular target. That dot with the A on it, this is a person on this graph right here. This particular person fit within our filter perfectly that we set for this target. So they were low A, low B. We said we wanted a low A, low B, or a high A, low B on the other one. So, and then the C trait, we said, you know what, we kind of straddled the middle, and then we wanted a very precise person in this particular case. This, by the way, is a 6 sigma wide graph. If you remember that from math class. If somebody's trait falls right here in the middle, they're the average of those 30 people that have gone through the survey. So they're average for that particular trait. So in this case, the C trait, it's almost situational, meaning they're either patient or fast-paced depending on the need that arises for that particular situation. So whereas the D trait, they're super high D, they're never going to be sloppy. You know, they're definitely following the rules. We have a client that has a D trait where it's right here. The guy gets up every morning at 2:30 and runs a marathon every morning. He's a high C, high D, so he's methodical and detail oriented. You know, just almost a weird person, right? So, at least I think so. You know, so you definitely want to set the target right for the trait, and you want to abide by it. And it's hard to do it today because applicant flow is a problem sometimes. And so you're looking at, you just want to fill a hole, but you know what happens when you just fill a hole. You know, we've all done it. I've done it 1,000 times, and so we want to try to avoid that. So when we look at all the things that we want you to collect from a data point perspective, we've got the application, the resume, and the interview. but we also have that cognitive test that we set, and we've done that as well. So the first thing that we do is actually the behavioral survey after they apply, and then we have them do the cognitive. This takes 5 minutes, this takes 12. You can get every applicant to do this. I know you think, oh, will they even do it? Once they've committed to do the behavioral survey, and now you're coming back at them later with the cognitive, they will take it, and it's a very important metric. Hired. Now what? So most of what I do, we're a hiring platform. We also work with companies to make sure that we not only just hire the right people, but we make sure that they get onboarded correctly, that they engage with the team well. And so driving results with people data is really critical. Who knows the golden rule? What's the golden rule?
Treat others how you want to be treated.
Treat others how you would want to be treated. What's wrong with the golden rule?
Not everybody wants to be treated the same.
Correct. Not everybody wants to be treated the same way. Why would they not want to be treated? Why would you want to be treated like me? Right? And so, are you social and outgoing?
Right.
You are. Is anybody introverted in here? Introverted. I didn't think anybody was going to raise their hand. So get an introvert over here. Do you love it when I just come into your workspace and just start talking? Patty, I want to talk to you about my weekend right now. I know you're in the middle of that spreadsheet, but you need to just listen to me, right? That's the worst thing in the world, right? But I like that as a social person because that's how I am. So I'm thinking, oh, I'm just treating her with the golden rule. So the golden rule is broken, I say. So people call that sacrilege. And there's a lot of good parts of the golden rule. Okay, treat others with respect and dignity and all that good stuff. But from a personality perspective, the golden rule is broken. There are 17 different reference profiles and predictive index. Each one of these behavioral surveys have different components like this. DISC has the different letters that you guys are probably familiar with. The 17 different reference profiles are 17 different neighborhoods of personality. So on a Maverick profile, for example, not all Mavericks are created equal, but if you know another Maverick, they're a lot alike. And I immediately get along with people like me, so I can use the golden rule with another Maverick. I can't use the golden rule with a Craftsman because a Craftsman is almost the opposite of a Maverick, for example. So when we do your profile, we'll know it's one of these 17 reference profiles. The target I showed you earlier was a specialist profile that we had set, and that's a really great housekeeper, maintenance technician profile, that type of thing that we're looking for. So, and what we've done is we've gone out and we've looked at all the different jobs within a VRM, and we said, okay, what is the best performing target for this particular role? An example of that is Navis is a client. They have 200 at-home agents that in ResForce. We took them all through this, and then we correlated that back to their conversion ratio on reservations. So it told us what the best behavioral profile was from a conversion ratio perspective. And you're shaking your head, right?
Which one was it?
What's that?
May I ask which one was it?
Yes, and it surprised me. And I had for years, because I've been doing this for 12, 13 years now, and I was hiring what I thought based on just doing what we did earlier, but I hadn't done the validity tests. And so I'm thinking it's like an altruist or, one of the, and I thought we needed high social in a call center. You don't want high social in a call center. Why do we not, Doug? Why do we
Not this.
What's that? They talk to you, they don't listen. Now, highest Bs don't listen, they just talk, and they don't listen to the client. So we wanted a low A, low B. I thought, it was a pretty fast-paced environment. You're going from one call to the next. No, you need methodical and patient, right? So highest C, so that was the operator trait. And then we wanted a somewhat high D trait because we wanted them to get it right, precise, and detail-oriented. So now every time we're looking for a call center agent, we're looking for an operator profile. Low A, low B, high C, high D. I'm using those letters, but so somebody who's more collaborative in nature. I don't need a super assertive person. I need somebody that's going to listen well, and I need them to be patient. Because what happens on reservations calls? I mean, you know better than they ask the same questions over and over and over again. So you're answering that, and so it requires that repetitive.
Why can't I bring my pet? It's only 50 pounds.
My Rottweiler. Rottweiler's nice. So we say use the platinum rule, not the golden rule. What do you think the platinum rule is?
Treat others the way they want to be treated.
Correct. So, and the way that we do that, if I know Doug's personality behavior, if I have his behavioral traits in front of me, and I know Doug's a low A, he's not, he's high A.
Is that good?
Yeah, no, it is, yeah. No, low A, everybody's perfect just the way they are. Let me say that again, everybody's perfect just the way they are. So, if you're a low A and I'm a high A, if I want to treat you that way, I'm going to slow my roll and I'm going to ask you what you think, because you might not tell me because I'm too large and in charge. If we're a low A and a high A, he's a high A too, so we don't have that problem. But if I know what somebody's behavioral traits are, I can completely change the way I interact with that individual, and I can say, instead of going, Patty, what would you rather be? How could I treat you with respect?
Not coming to me at all.
Not kidding me at all. Leave me alone. So the way that I would work with Patty, if I was leading Patty, let's say, I would email Patty. Patty, I'd like to talk to you next Monday. Do you have time in the afternoon? Here's the agenda of what I would like to cover. Would you like to get that email? As opposed to me just dropping it?
Yes.
And why would you like to get that email?
So I can be prepared and know what's gonna come.
They want to think through things. They don't want to talk through it. You want to think through it, right? So you want to be prepared. So a low B is going to spend some time to think through what's on the agenda. And if you give them that time, they're going to be prepared. Now, high B, you give them the agenda. First of all, they even set the appointment. Then they show up and they didn't read the agenda. They're just going to talk through it in real time, right? And that's the difference between a high. Now, Patty, conversely, has to understand about the other person and maybe meet them in the middle, right? And so, platinum rule, if you get nothing else out of this, get people data, figure out what makes them tick, and use this rule. And you will change the game as a leader in your company. I am telling you, I've watched it happen. It's absolutely phenomenal. Question?
So my hire was actually a product of Better Talent. So I've only been in the vacation rental industry for 4 weeks. And I did all of this in order to get hired. It's hard, okay? But no one was gonna beat me out. I was so impressed with the process that I actually researched Better Talent. I was like, this is fascinating what they're having me do, right? There was over 500 applicants for my role. So it was, it was a big role. Which is a huge compliment to Cozy Vacation Rentals. That's fine. Hi Doug, I stalked you online for a little bit.
How do I spell your name for the check again?
But it was wonderful.
So,
I heard a lot
thank you
about
for
that.
that. So,
Thank you.
did you have questions?
I was just saying that.
I was just gonna make a comment, you ever thought about doing these, branching out, doing these premarital? You say a few incidents.
Love screws everything up. That's all I can say about that. We actually have a tool where it compares two people side by side. It's a phenomenal tool for marital students. So, yeah, and okay, that works. That rule works really well. And have anybody read the love languages? If you haven't read it, it's phenomenal. It's another way to look at that. So, but yeah, the platinum role is a game changer for sure. So these behavioral drives. So how do I know that about that? Sorry, Sue.
No, that's 5 minutes.
Oh, 5 minutes. I gotta fly. Okay. So these are the drives that are up here. And these drives create these needs. So in this case, this is an extremely independent, assertive, and self-confident individual. They need lots of independence, control of their own activities, and to be challenged. If you have a high A and you don't challenge that person, they're probably gonna quit, right? If you have a high A and you micromanage that person, they're probably gonna quit. They certainly won't like their job, right? And so that if I have a high A and I need a high A for a particular role, you're a revenue manager, I need to set the expectations and let them fly, right? Because they're going to do it, and that's what you wanted. You wanted somebody that was assertive and self-confident. So, cognitive assessments, behavioral assessments are stable over time, by the way. So, by about age 20 in females, age 25, guys were slower, your personality profile is pretty much baked in. So that does not change, whereas obviously resume and interviews change over time. The whole person shows up. Thank you very much. That is my email address. and that's my Calendly if you want. If you guys want to contact me, I will send you the behavioral survey and the cognitive if you want to be tortured. But behavioral survey takes 5 minutes, and I'll send you the results so you guys can check it out. Just kind of check how it works. Questions?
Who's got a question?
Super
Here.
interesting.
Well, thank you.
Okay, here's a question.
What is the cognitive test that you give?
Yeah, it's a 12-minute test. It's 50 questions in length, and it tells us how fast the individual can learn new things. So somebody who has a higher cognitive ability is going to get up to speed quicker for that particular role. So for technical roles, or even just learning a PMS platform if they've never used whatever one you're using, or in this case, a revenue management tool, we want a pretty high cog.
All right, we have another question.
Do you do these for existing teams?
Absolutely, and she does things for existing teams too, which is DISC I mentioned earlier, which is really good for that. So if you're not using one of us, use somebody, that's what I would say.
Sue's been my BFF this year.
Oh, yeah. She's
We're
my
all
hero,
glad.
so, you know, I sit at her feet, just so you know, she's good rock, so. But yeah, we go in and we assess, it's one of the first things we do when we get a new client, we'll assess the whole team and take them through it. And we actually plot you on a graph, and it shows you where you might have gaps in your team, so it's a really cool way to do it, so.
Any other questions over there? Questions?
Real quickly. So for the pre-employment screening is 5 minutes, about 5 minutes?
About 5
I like that because so often these take so long that people don't want to apply.
I don't wanna do it, yeah, if it was any longer than that, you
Yeah,
know,
that's good.
20 minutes, there's no way people are gonna do it today.
For an hourly job.
No,
They're gonna
exactly.
go down the list of whatever.
That's what attracted me to the music. It's the first time I saw it,
That's
because I
good.
had done a lot of other things, and I'm like, wow, this is amazing. So. Any more questions? All right, well, thank you guys very much.
Great job.